everybody, and welcome to Wall Street Hackers. My name is Nick Pellavito. I'll be the moderator today of our show. And of course, on Wall Street Hackers, which is one of the top-rated shows on the Pod TV network, we discuss things from like dividend stocks and stocks of the week to the stories of the week and also the quotes of the week, along with some interesting other tidbits that we can only get for somebody who spends their time in this area. And the gentleman actually received his bachelor's degree in economics from UCLA, his law degree from the University of Miami, and also his master's in business administration from New York University with an emphasis on finance, spending 17 years on the street. The hacker himself, we're going to bring in with the news of the day, Peter Bennett. Peter,
hi,
take it away, as they would say.
Yeah, hi, audience. Hi, Nick. So often it's more of the same, basically, because for 15 months we've been seeing this numbers come in on inflation that are way too high, and the Fed kind of reacts. Chairman Powell did speak hawkishly to the Senate this week, but the key number was the consumer spending was up 0.6% in January, and that was after up 0.4% in December. So inflation adjusted is really not an increase, but there's no sign of a slowdown in any of the numbers. And that's the thing. They have to slow the economy. And the Fed is way behind the curve. So if you looked at the market, it reacted again in its semi-delusional way. It went down 1.5% on Powell's hawkish news, but it doesn't really care. And I was thinking about this, and really, sometimes people just have an opinion, and no matter what happens, they won't change until reality hits them. And I think that's our prediction, that the market will wake up one day and people will say, I was wrong. But once you have a firm conviction, and especially when you were told for decades that the market never goes down or you should always be invested in these strategies, it takes a lot to get somebody to change their opinion. But my prediction is, it looks to me, and I can't promise anything, full disclosure, we can never promise anything in terms of our picks on anything, but we have been really correct in a lot of ways over the last year and a half, especially picking energy as the best place to be. But there's no guarantee on one side, but the other side is, it looks to me like near 100% that this is inflation out of control. So the Fed futures jumped to a terminal rate of 5.64%. And it was just 4.8% in a month ago, a little over a month ago. So the market keeps adjusting the rates, but it doesn't really push the S&P or NASDAQ down more. As a matter of fact, if you looked at the market, it's been slightly up, more or less flat for 9 months since June last year. There was a drop last year when the market started thinking about inflation, but since then it's just meandering. And I think this slow change to react is partly the Fed, because the Fed is doing their untested experiment of slower increases for longer, hoping to avoid a recession, although history shows that there's never been a time that they could avoid a recession and get inflation under control in the last 70 years. So we will see, but I think there's going to be a repricing. And if you look at the 5 areas that we've talked about for a year and a half now, almost, there's no progress in any of them. First of all, in the one area where I thought there was going to be progress, housing, that is a prediction. Even there, you have now mixed news. So on one side, you had housing prices drop, according to Redfin, for the first time in a decade. So that's a sign of things going this way. And also on that side, the Federal Reserve of Dallas predicted that if things don't go well, it wasn't a guarantee, but they're saying if it doesn't go well, housing could drop 20%. And I think it won't go well. So I think housing could drop 20%. But on the other hand, the drop itself for the month was only 0.6%. And that's after huge increases, maybe 40%, in a year, and so many increases during the COVID period. So this is not a radical change that's going to reverse inflation. And it's just the beginning. And now look on the other side. Besides the fact that it was only 0.6%, here's a quote from the chief economist of Apollo Global Management. And this shows you even that housing isn't moving in the right direction, clearly. So he said, he was talking about housing is back, actually. He said, quote, traffic of prospective buyers of new homes is rebounding. Home builder sentiment and home buyer sentiment are rebounding. New home sales are beginning to recover. The average number of offers received per sold property is starting to recover. This does not look like a correction. He also said, with the housing markets recovering, the risk of rising that the expected strong rollover in the shelter component of the CPI may never happen. But then he added, the Fed hasn't raised interest rates enough. And as a result, even the interest rate sensitive component of GDP are not starting to recover. So that's the point. They have to raise rates a lot more, and the market has to react before we even begin to get a turn. Second of all, in energy, the China's reopening and there was an article, and this really was a real affirmation of what we've been talking about for a long time. We've been saying that USAC, one of our investments, I have about 5% in there, and it's done very well. They make they're a natural gas motor creator, but they said in a conference call, and they would know the industry, that the oil and gas industry is underinvesting by 40% to maintain current production. And that's not to, increase it, just to maintain it. So that's scary. And this has been going on for 5 to 7 years. Oil and gas companies are putting in less than half of what they used to put in. And that can last 5 to 7 years, but it can't last 10 years. So we could be hitting a real energy crisis, or at least much, much higher energy. I'd be almost 100% on that too. I can't see how energy isn't going much higher. I don't know, $6 a gallon might shock people, $7 until it's reduced demand. But here's the interesting article. It said that they were talking about oil and gas companies and how they're compensating their executives. And they said that many oil and gas companies now have totally eliminated production as a goal. And others have reduced the importance of production as a goal substantially. They're emphasizing cash flow and other measures. So what does that tell you? This is not turning around in terms of energy. The companies are focused on shareholder return, on not overinvesting. And so they're not even incenting their executives to do that. So the oil and gas is going to be the real shocker. And in the 70s, when inflation hit 15% and huge numbers, that was one of the main causes, clearly. Then we get to unemployment and employment. Again, no progress. I mean, I wish I could say progress. We will have progress eventually. So ADP came out with a report, 240,000 new jobs created by the private sector. Forecast was 200,000. And unemployment is still at 3.4%, the lowest since 1969. And again, I hear more and more numbers that relate to that. 1969, right before 15 years of uncontrolled inflation that really affected the economy. So the Fed is not making progress. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, the market now is pricing in a 76% chance of a 50 basis point increase, where they had 20 as the most likely scenario. But even 50 is not going to do it. The Fed's untested experiment is trying to stay below the inflation rate. And for theoretical reasons, I don't think it's going to work. And it has never worked before in 70 years. And if there is a recession, the stock market could, on average, get very ugly. Average 35% drop. So somebody's going to be very wrong. And I think it's going to be the market and the Fed. But the Fed will catch up because they have to control inflation. The picture in Europe also remains the same, basically. Out of the 20 Euro countries, and keep in mind that the Euro hasn't been around forever, so saying record inflation isn't quite as significant as 50 years, but they just hit a record for them, inflation rate of 7.7%, and their services inflation hit 4.4%, also a record for the Euro 20 countries. Now, you'd say, well, That's the same in the United States. Services inflation is out of control. And services inflation, interestingly, is one of the hardest to control because it's very hard to find substitutes. If somebody's mowing your lawn, you might do it yourself, but more likely they'll continue. If you're getting a haircut, you could cut it at home, but most likely you'll continue. So services inflation doesn't change very much. And again, another data point on top of all the other data points, everything pointing towards uncontrolled inflation and very little Fed progress. The Fed has a long way to go. That's the bottom line. So this week, quotes of the week, I only have one, but it really tells the story of what Wall Street Hackers is saying. And I like it because it was a research paper by a group of economists. And one of those economists was the chief economist of JP Morgan. Another one was a former director of the New York Fed. So again, these are pretty credible people. They looked at 16 periods of disinflation, reducing inflation, since 1950. And here's what the report said, quote, "We find," I underlined, "no instance in which a significant central bank induced disinflation without a recession." So I skipped a word. Disinflation occurred without a recession. So the point is, again, 70 years of history, there has to be a recession to slow the economy, and the stock market doesn't want to accept that. So moving on from financial news, we have a lot of most interesting stories of the week in our interesting stories of the week segment. I found it very interesting. A study by a college of cardiology found that people who use marijuana daily are 1/3 more likely to develop coronary artery disease. So I believe that people said, well, there are no proven health risks from marijuana. Well, now there are. That study seemed credible, and they're talking about 1/3 higher risk from marijuana. And obviously marijuana use is spread throughout the country. And now we realize that this is a serious health issue. New York just made a deal with Con Edison. What they're trying to do is pay for the transmission lines that will move energy from solar and wind plants. But this is obviously expensive too. This transition is very expensive. Whether it's not as worth it is another discussion. We've discussed that a lot. The pluses and minuses, the dangers of climate change versus the costs. But the bottom line is electric bills and natural gas bills in New York are going to go up 20 to 30% over the next 3 years just because of this. And New York has enough issues with taxes, but energy is going to be a big issue in New York in terms of the cost. That's a lot on a northern state energy bill. In Portland, Oregon, Walmart is now closing 2 stores, their final stores in Portland, because of soaring retail crime. This gets into the whole thing of the press and the Democrats. So many liberals have somehow not been strong enough on crime. And even a lot of Democrats are saying that, and they're starting to move in that transition. I blame the media for that. The media, which shelters some of the liberal party too much, and then they don't really get to the right positions. But this is a very unpopular position. People are against crime. So, but now it's going to hurt Portland because, as a store like Walmart closes, people lose access to those very discounted prices. The U.S. Secure Act 2.0 was passed last year. And interestingly, the minimum distribution age is now for going up to age 73. It is now 73 in 2023. So they keep raising the age because of longer life expectancies. Very good for the consumer, who has IRAs or 401ks, so they can wait longer in case they live longer, and they're not forced to take those initial distributions. Of course, if you skip too long, you'll get hammered in the back end because those rates go up. So you have to watch that. They also reduced the penalty for not distributing, which is required every year, from 50% to 25%. Still a big penalty, but that was two of the biggest changes in the Secure 2.0 Act, Secure Act 2.0. The world's largest factory for converting carbon dioxide to methanol is now up and running. And this is fascinating to me. The plant will save 500,000 tons of CO2 annually. partly because they're converting CO2 into methanol, and also they're not using coal to create methanol. And that's a big plus. And also, in a similar story, Occidental Petroleum unveiled plans for a new carbon and sequestration hub along the Texas Gulf Coast. The hub would be over 55 acres and will store 1.2 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide. It's one of 5 hubs Occidental is planning in Texas and Louisiana. So, and EPD, by the way, one of our investments, about 2%, pipeline, love energy pipelines. That is going to be doing some of the pipelines for the CO2 network. So both these point out what we've been saying for a long time, which is technology has got to be the major part of this answer, because projections for the world are largely growing populations, and the needs of developing countries will probably offset fully, unfortunately, any solar or wind gains in terms of CO2 dispersal. So we're not really sure, and you can argue this either side, but there are experiments about CO2 that are concerning. And so technology has to be the answer to not disrupt the energy economy and yet control CO2. In other news, okay, so I'll say it up front. We try not to get involved in politics, but whether it's Republican, Democrat, in the White House or the Senate, these issues also involve energy and finance. So here's what Kamala Harris said in a speech recently. Quote, "For working families, we have reduced, I said, and she said, heating and electricity bills, so folks have more money in their pockets to buy things like school supplies, replace dishwashers, or take a family vacation." Well, first of all, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports a 14.3% in increases in electric bills in 2022, and it's also projecting further rises in 23 and 24. And anybody who actually pays their electric bill, I guess, knows that the electric bills are not going down, they're going up. So I guess my neutral comment is that maybe she needs a new speechwriter. I'd say she does. In a less political view, but topic, but in the music world, last interesting story of the week is the 2 surviving members of the Beatles may come together that's a pun in the article, come together, for the Rolling Stones' upcoming album. Paul McCartney, age 80, and Ringo, star 82, are reported to both play a part in the currently announced Stones album. This is according to Variety magazine. According to them, McCartney recorded bass parts during recording sessions in LA, and Starr is also slated to play the drums. So that would be really an interesting album for sure. So let's take an advertisement, and then we'll get into the dividend pick of the week and our panel discussion of the week. See you soon.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Couliet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner, and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office, to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252.
And we're back. So what to do segment. This is always short and hasn't really changed for 15 months. You know, inflation is still here, as we said, and the Fed is way behind the curve, and we're probably having a recession, and the market's probably going to tank. Probably, because they never guarantee on anything. But I think so. You have to be very cautious. Own dividend stocks, and especially own energy, because we're probably heading for major increases in energy costs in the next few years or sooner. This is a long-term problem. These projects take 5 to 7 years just to come to fruition. Some of the biggest ones, 15 years. Once they realize, well, we've been underinvesting for 10 years, you know, it's going to take a long time to turn this around. So the Fed is still in their untested experiment, and it's not working, and they keep moving along with it. But at some point, they're just going to keep ratcheting up, and then the market's going to say, wait, we can buy bonds at higher rates and whatever. And sooner or later, they've got to force the economy to slow down. So the dividend stock of the week is we've been doing a series on international dividend stocks that we consider safe. There's never a guarantee. Again, I have to keep saying that. But first of all, you know, mostly I'm U.S. centric because U.S. has a lot of oil, so you have to be careful about other countries. But the great thing about dividend stocks or bonds, for that matter, is if you have a cash flow and the market goes against you or bonds rates go up, then at least you can reinvest the cash flow. You know, if the market goes down and you don't have a cash flow, then now you just ride it out and, you know, wait for things to go back up. But if you have new cash flow, it could be seen as a good thing because you can now get a higher rate, maybe a much higher rate on bonds if the time comes, or just reinvest in energy. So this one I really like in a way. We're 29% energy roughly, so I don't want to do too much on this. Generally, it's been always pipelines, which I love because I think they have safety and high returns, and also royalty trusts. I've covered a few of those. And after I finish international, maybe I'll do a few local, and then we'll go back to the energy and do a new cycle on some new ones and stuff. But the dividend stock of the week is WDS, Woodside Energy Group. Very interesting company. First of all, it's now Australia's largest oil and gas company. It's now a top 10 oil and gas producer in the world, and it's also one of the largest LNG producers. One of the reasons I say now is it was big, very big before, but they just acquired BHP's petroleum arm. So now that's part of the company too. So they even grew bigger. And I'm only 0.25% here for a couple of reasons. One, I like pipelines and royalty trusts even more than producers, but this one I like a lot. And maybe I'll add to it again down the road. It might be one of the first I add to, but right now I'm only 0.25%. But what do I like about it? First of all, it's dividend, and I have to give you a footnote now. The numbers on this are a little harder. It's an Australian company, and usually I can dig deep, but on this one, couldn't get anything on TD Ameritrade, E-Trade. I can find some articles about it. I found some numbers, but I couldn't find as much numbers. But here's what I did find. The dividend, depending on the period, it runs 8.1 to 9.7%. That's because it has a variable dividend. So if you look at 6 months, you get a different number than 9. But 8 to almost 10% dividend, well, that's hard to find in the market. Again, and a company I think is going to be safe for a long time. Its trailing PE is 7.6. So that the PE itself, even though I couldn't find the cash flows easily, that covers the dividend. So pretty safe company, I would say. And again, I love the cross between energy and international. So I added 0.25% in my IRA, but this is one I'll be looking to add quite possibly down the road. This is probably the first energy one because I don't want too much more of the ones I put so much into. So that's the energy stock of the week. And again, I would say you better own energy as a hedge against anything else, because last year, energy was the only place to invest, energy and commodities. It's the only one that went up. And if that trend continues, everything else could get hurt. Bonds could get hurt, although if you're buying safe bonds, at least you get your your principal back to maturity. So we better get into the discussion of the week before we run out. So the question is, and this is not as simple for anybody, whatever you believe, we look both sides. Should companies be involved in social and environmental causes? Quick background. So many companies have obviously become involved in social and environmental causes. It's the trend. You see it more and more and more every day. Some argues these are very important issues. And the environment, social issues. They feel like companies need to be part of change, and they also, some people believe, and it's arguable, that the environment is a critical issue where the world could be in danger. So companies need to be involved. On the other side, also strong arguments. They say, well, companies are designed to focus on profit. That's supposed to be their mission, and that needs to be their only mission. And everything else complicates things. So this is a controversial topic, and we love to look at both sides again. Now, if you look at the other background, without a doubt, getting involved in social issues has hurt a lot of companies and the environmental issues too. But especially the social issues, I'd say the NFL and NBA are prime examples of this. They have alienated large parts of their viewership. And now the NFL, the baseball also has done the same, and they're creating rules that seem a little crazy to me because they're desperate to quicken the game. I think that's going to help. But maybe a lot of the damage was done by losing viewership. And then if we look arguably at one of the strongest example, one that's in the news all the time, is Disney. So Disney, first, there's so many examples of Disney, but it used to be their mission was, we're going to be the happiest place on earth. Now, at least that's clearly not their primary mission, because getting involved in political issues and social issues is not about happiness. So, but again, some can argue this is more important. Examples include Disney voiced a very strong opinion against a Florida bill that prohibited discussions of sexual matters with very young children. I think it was 8 to 10. And I have to throw in a footnote. They made it about homosexuality, they believe, or something like that. But it turns out it was just about talking about sexual issues. So I think they were actually wrong there. I mean, I understand. I don't want to point out wrong and right, because there's a lot of the issues, maybe the environmentalists are right or the social issues are right. I'm not taking a position, but on that particular one, they seem to take the wrong position. They also have introduced many transgender characters and homosexual characters who it does alienate their audience. A recent Thor movie surprised me. They had a discussion that was fairly lengthy about having an orgy. And that, I don't even see the social issue there unless they're being activist about having orgies. I don't see why they would do that, but that was included. And then this week, they eliminated the song Zippity Doo Dah from their parades at their theme parks. And their thinking was it was connected to Song of the South. Now, again, that might be a stretch, but they're pretty strong activists. So this has cost them their privileged status in Florida. It has hurt them economically with some clients. And then the final example is banks and financial institutions are also lobbying against or refusing to deal with more and more oil and gas companies. Maybe misguided again. You can argue both sides. So, question. Should companies be involved in social and environmental causes? Our panel is Nick. Nick?
Yeah, only one here. Well, you asked a very good question, because there's a law that's being either passed or already passed that if you're managing a pension fund, you do not have to consider ESG issues. In other words, you don't have to consider the social issues. But if you look at the other side, and you have to, who makes this determination? How do you make the determination? And you brought up what I think, Peter, was a really good point, is the Disney issue. Now, here's part of the issues that the media doesn't bring out because they're conflicted with Disney. Remember,
Nick, I just want to mention we can go to 35 minutes, right?
Yeah, we can go. Yes, we can go to 35. You're right. So we got 5 more minutes. But
okay, great.
That's it. Okay, with Disney, remember, there's a lot of people who work for Disney who are gay. I mean, the media just doesn't point it out. Frankly, a lot of the media industry is gay. Okay, I mean, they just don't want to point that out because it's a conflict of interest. And so they had a lot of pressure on them internally to even change the narrative from what was really an act that you described correctly, because I went through and read it, was in Florida, to prohibit the sexual education for a younger generation. Then what they did, and didn't say gay in it at all, they translated it to the media, don't say gay, and they pushed it out. So it was a complete agenda push. Now let's go to the retaliatory aspects of Governor DeSantis. Got rid of their special status. Now, in one respect, I actually agree with what he did, because they shouldn't have had special status to begin with. But they did that to get Disney to build a big infrastructure in Orlando, and that's where it stays. So can companies engage in social issues? The answer is yes.
Well, we know they can, but should they?
Well, they do it at their own risk and peril. Okay,
They do.
and that's the bottom line. So you can go ahead and jump in all you want to the water can be hot and you can get burned, or what happens, you can have a nice warm bath. Depends on what you jump into.
Depends what you do. Exactly. You better be right if you get involved in social issues, but also you have to, yeah, exactly.
You know what? I always tell people, seek counsel before you do that.
Yeah,
because
be careful. That is the safest thing anybody would ever say, no matter what their position. If you're going to jump in, you better know the effects, because they could have a big effect on your company.
But if you notice, you can even almost tell the ones out there, Peter, that have sought attorneys, because the minute the apology comes up, it has this nice little language in. And it's usually
But they're supposed to consult the attorneys first.
I know that, but usually they do it afterwards. And then
If there's an apology, then they did make a mistake, because that means they went too far.
I apologize to my fans and family. They don't want to hear it, blah, 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 blah. And you can tell that was written by a lawyer. So finally what happened, they decided to seek legal counsel to basically clean up the mess. And that's
right. But many don't. And they just, are activists, and that's it. But again, you can argue either side. So here's my conclusions, and they're similar to yours in a way. First of all, these are obviously very difficult issues. It depends on the issue. Maybe there is a need for change. Maybe there isn't a need for change. Environmental, that's so arguable, and we've discussed that both sides so often on the show. But one, I don't like the idea of diluting capitalism, because I'm not sure how much effect it will have. But capitalism has created so much wealth, and maybe that's a negative term for so many people, but capitalism is why America is so rich, and so many other countries around the world. I mean, we used to live in a feudal society, and capitalism was one of the main things. Creation of America, capitalism, where we just had kings, and everybody was like, okay, I can live on my, my lord's property and farm for him. And, then, democracy took place, capitalism took place. But the prime example I think of, and there's so many of socialism and communism failing, is look at the U.S. and Russia. The U.S. and Russia both have tremendous natural resources. Russia has huge amounts of oil. It was the number one producer of oil in the world. They have minerals, they have land, they have people. But why is it that the lifestyle, the wealth of the country per capita is so low compared to the United States? Well, I would say the only arguable reason is because of capitalism versus the communism, the corruption that goes with that. And I always think this, but I don't think it'll ever happen. But I wish Putin would, watch this show one day and say, and get this point. But why doesn't he become the most famous Russian ever and say, we're going to adopt the U.S. Constitution and we're going to go with that? He would change the history of Russia for 1,000 years. Get rid of the corruption, change everything around. But I doubt it'll happen. But he would be the most famous Russian in history. He would be the George Washington of Russia. But the final point is, we are running out of time. Is look, there's so many parties involved in deciding on a social issue. There's management, but management can change. You could have a blue manager, to be short, or a liberal manager, versus the next week, the CEO could be conservative. So that's going to go up and down. Employees are going to influence things in their own positions. And customers are going to influence things, and shareholders. And you can't satisfy everybody, first of all, most likely. So you could be one side and the other side. But here, I was still going to say this is such a difficult issue, but here's the final line for me. When I was on Wall Street, my first real mentor, Dick York, he was an amazing mentor. I wish he'd mentored me longer, but he taught me, I was at Dean Witter, and he taught me the customer has to come first. Everything else, profitability, the business growth, everything comes after that. But you have to be customer oriented. So that should be the mission of companies. You need to be customer oriented. And if you're alienating a third or a half of your customers, that's the exact opposite. So I'd rather leave the politics to the politicians, and hopefully the voters elect the right ones, or nonprofits, and let capitalism do what it's best at, and that's growing wealth. So that ends our show. We're running out of time. As Kim says, hopefully she'll be back next week. I think she will. Get healthy and get wealthy. And we'll see you next week, at Thursday at 1 o'clock. A new show comes out just about every week. See you then. Thanks for watching.